this will save your life next week.
Let's save your life today. Not long term, today.
This is like the video loneliness or something.
By specifically finding out what's most likely to kill you next week so you can actually avoid it.
So basically this like a final destination, I guess.
First, let's assume that 3 million people will watch this video and that you're all among our typical viewers. You're between the ages of 15 and 35 and you're living in Western countries. We based this video on statistics specifically for your demographic and our own estimates. They're not perfect, but roughly correct.
So not for EU people.
Don't worry, we might also save your life if you're older or live somewhere else. Okay, now let's gather all 3 million of you in 40 packed football stadiums. Look around. Most of you are teens and young adults. So much potential. Unfortunately, by the end of next week, 58 of you watching right now will not be alive anymore. 3,000 of you will sadly have
Next week, there.
passed in a year. That's 1 in 1,000. Or not. Today, we will save your, yes, your life by looking at the avoidable ways you might die. We'll not cover long-term things like diseases because we want to prevent your death next week. Your life consists of millions of micro-decisions, and some of you are on a path that will end soon. Can we guide you down a different path? Humans are incredibly bad at judging the real risks of life. Bad things happen to people all the time because there are so many of us. And since the news
You just don't get into a car and you live much longer.
focuses so much on freak accidents, we have a completely distorted picture of what actually poses a danger to us. For example, the chance any of you are going to die in a terror attack is below 0.0002%. There are super risky activities that are clearly insanely dangerous, like wingsuit flying. If all 3 million of you were to practice this sport, about 285 of you would die just next week. Then there are things that are pretty
Yeah, I don't think people are that
dangerous. If all of you
are going to attempt that.
rode a motorcycle, 35 of you would not survive next week. If you don't want this kind of risk in your life, well, don't do these things. It turns out what's most likely to kill you next week are things that feel safe, that you do all the time
Like what?
and are routine, things you may even be really good at. This is what
Is it walking?
we'll prevent. By far the most dangerous thing you're currently doing is driving. 8 of you will die in a car crash just next week. 416 of you over the next year. Mostly because most of you are not aware what driving really is. You're zooming through the world in a metal
He's just roasting American people.
torpedo at the speed of a cheetah or faster. In an average car
Especially in a BMW
that
drivers.
weighs 1.5 tons at roughly 60 kilometers an hour or 40 miles an hour, you have the mechanical energy of a piano dropped from the top of the Statue of Liberty. If you crash, this energy is released into your car and, more importantly, your body. 30% of deadly car accidents are caused by speeding, mostly because you overestimate yourself. But that will kill 2 of you next week. It's very straightforward. If you go fast, you have less time to react and only notice the danger when it's too late. A lot of you watching tend to go the speed limit regularly, which saves very little time. If your destination is 20 minutes away at 100 kilometers an hour or 60 miles an hour, driving 15 kilometers an hour or 10 miles an hour faster will save less than 3 minutes. But your probability
Only 3.
of a deadly crash increases by 60%. So 2 of you may survive next week if you just tone down your speeding. This alone would eliminate the most dangerous activity in your life. Isn't this wild? Close second is drinking alcohol and driving, causing 25% of deadly crashes. In the next week, this will also kill 2 of you. You don't even need to feel
This drinking and driving.
drunk, you just have to have consumed enough to slow your reaction time. Even if you still feel completely in control, chances are high that you're not. Aside from being extremely illegal, it's one of the most reckless and dangerous things too many people do regularly. And it's easy to avoid. Just don't do it, ever. Taking a cab after that work event next week, even if you only had 2 drinks, might save your life. Just because you were distracted while driving, 1 of you will die next week. Maybe because you were eating or fumbling with the radio, But let's be real, probably because you were looking at your phone. If you drive at 60 kilometers an hour or 40 miles an hour and check your phone for just a moment, you've now crossed an entire football field, completely blind. Stop doing this and you might survive next week. Lastly, we want to have an especially frank word with the three of you that will die because you didn't wear a seatbelt. What an incredibly stupid way to die young. Way more of you will get into a car crash and be injured for all the same reasons. And of course, often the victims of crashes are not to blame at all, and many of you watching right now will end up hurting someone else. But you now know how to reduce the chances of this happening massively. Let's move on to other deadly things that you can easily avoid. 26 of you will die by falling, or more precisely by hitting the ground in the next year, which means one of you will die every 2 weeks.
Construction workers and all.
You'd think the danger of height was not as big of a deal, but it is. Going up ladders, working on scaffolding or on a roof, and going hiking in nature is normal. But falling from a height of just 2 meters has about the same mechanical energy as a bowling ball dropped from a 7-story building. You probably wouldn't want to be hit by it, and it only gets worse the higher
I did that all the time when I was young. What?
you go. For a fall from 5 meters, the height
Maybe I was too skinny at the time.
of a large ladder, the equivalent would be the energy of a bowling ball dropped from a 19-story building. But even just falling over can easily be fatal because your head is all the way at the top of your body. Another surprisingly dangerous thing is water. One of you will drown next week. Being in and around water is fun and doesn't seem to be a big deal, mainly for 3 reasons.
Yeah, definitely not going around water.
You'll underestimate how dangerous a body of water is and be taken by strong currents or riptides. You'll overestimate your swimming abilities. You're most likely a much worse swimmer than you think. Or, also sadly common, you'll go into the water drunk, especially dangerous because you're more reckless and even more likely to be overwhelmed by a cold shock or hypothermia. Harmless situations around water turn deadly so quickly that in the US, drowning is the second most common cause of death by accident for kids, after, you may have guessed it, car crashes. So if you're going for a swim next week, keep this in mind. Make sure that the water is safe, assume you are at best a mediocre swimmer, and you won't die. Also, for the love of God, be careful on cruise ships. If you go overboard, you have a 60% chance of dying. Let's move on to the thing that will kill
Who actually goes to cruise ship for
the most
vacation?
people watching this video. This one is extremely sad and very delicate because sensationalist public discussion can make it worse. It's harming yourself. Statistically, about 10 of you could die this way next week. There's something that you might not be aware of that might save your life. The majority of these deaths happen in crisis situations, usually triggered by traumatic events and extraordinary circumstances that overwhelm people and undermine their coping strategies. Studies show that suicide rarely occurs out of the blue. There are warning signs, and often suicidal thoughts and feelings can be mastered by getting professional help, for example from a crisis intervention center. Most people who survive an attempt don't try again and end up being very glad that they did survive. It was just way too much for them, and they felt desperate and as if there was no way out. It would be so nice if someone watching this who's in a bad spot decides to get help. You matter. You really
Yeah, people don't want to get help though.
do, and the world is better with you in it. Please stay with us. If you currently feel overwhelmed by life, seeking help is not weakness, it's strength. We've put some resources for you in the video description.
That's nice.
This also means another thing. If you have someone in your life going through a crisis, withdrawing, expressing hopelessness, or talking about this topic, even jokingly, take it seriously. Show them that they're loved and important. You personally could save a life, maybe next week already. You might never know, but worst case, you've been
It takes like a certain huge amount of effort to do that.
a true friend. Now for the final thing, and to be honest, this will not save your life next week, but maybe this year. Cancer is sadly a real risk even for your
Cancer.
age group and will kill 5 of you next week. The most common being thyroid, breast and testicular cancer. The author of this video had cancer at the age of 32. If he'd been aware of this risk and went to regular checkups, this could have been entirely avoided. So this is also a personal heartfelt recommendation. We collected a few resources about
So
screening
do some regular checkups then.
and self-checkups in our sources for you. Check them out. At least one type of cancer is almost entirely avoidable: melanoma or skin cancer. You might be surprised how deadly this is, but as a great philosopher said, the sun is a deadly laser. It's burning your skin with the energy released from trillions of tons of plasma. The solution couldn't be simpler. Use sunscreen. It's been a while or you've been in the water. Cool, apply it again. About 9 of you will die of melanoma in the next year, so sunscreen might save your life. Okay, let's wrap up. Just by being more aware and modifying your behavior a little bit, you personally could survive next week. Dozens of all of you watching right now. Hundreds of you this year. Hopefully, you'll be able to tell us stories in the next few years of situations that almost turned really
Well,
bad,
thanks for this video.
but didn't because you behaved differently. And if you have people in your life that do or don't do the things we talked about today, please send them this video. It might save their lives too. Life is just the best thing, and we hope to celebrate it together for as long as possible.
Okay, that's nice. I guess I will end there.